vacation, I watched people pay money, good money, real money, to get strapped into a harness, to be lifted up 150 feet in the air, and then they would release a ripcord, and they would go flying down over the top of the crowd, and then they would soar back and forth. And I watched them do this for a while, and then I got the bug, and then I had to do it. So here I am paying my hard-earned money to have somebody strap me into this harness and lay down flat and then pull me up 150 feet in the air. And then they told me the worst thing. They said, "You've got to pull the ripcord. You've got to do this." And so I reached back behind me, my hand shaking, and I pulled the ripcord, and I went flying down, and I soared over the top of the crowd. Then I went flying backwards, and then I soared in front of the crowd again, and I kept going forward and backward and forward and backward, and I couldn't believe that I had done what I had done. Now, nobody in my family really wanted to watch me do that. Marcy refused to go with me to watch. I have a love-hate relationship with those kinds of things. You know, I hate heights, but there's something in me. I've said this before. I want to jump out of a plane in the worst way. I don't know why, but I do. I don't know what it is about that, but I look back on moments like that, things in my life where I say, man, I'm glad I took the risk. I'm glad that I did that. Because I have a great memory of that, and it was a fun little thing. And there are in life, there are good risks, and there are bad risks. There are calculated risks, and there are truly dangerous, almost stupid risks that people take. It's been said that risk is something that we all deal with at all times, that there are several different ways to have an outlook about risk. And some people look at risk as something to be avoided at all costs. That might be you. Like, I'm just totally risk averse. I don't want anything to do with risk. And so at all costs, I will live life safe. I don't do anything that might introduce risk into the equation of my life. Some of you are like that. Some of you think risk is just something to be endured. You just got to hang on long enough and you'll get through it. I know that there's risks that are going to need to happen in life, and I'm just going to get through it. I may not be happy about it, but I will survive. Some of you, though, are crazy. Some of you are like me a little bit. And you say, risk is something to be embraced. And you have those times that you risk, and those times that come up, and you say, let's just go for it, man. Let's just do it. Let's just make it happen. And I think back to some of the risks that I've taken, and the risks that we took to start Lifeline Church. You know, my family, I've talked about this. It was a risky move for us to start a new church, to leave the comfort of the known, the sphere of the known, into the land of the unknown, of things that we didn't know. There was a lot more questions than we had answers for. It was risky for some of you when you got a card in the mail, or you met somebody, or you saw a sign, and you say, there's a church meeting in a Brunswick zone, and you stepped in here for the first time, and you're like, I don't know if this is right or not, but you thought at least if it goes really bad, you can go play laser tag, go bowling or something. But you took a risk, and you came in here, you didn't know anybody, and you walked in, and there's a risk involved in that. While risk is not easy, I also know that without risk, we never really get a chance to see God do something. Isn't that right? Man, we're really having trouble. I'm sorry. Without risk, we never really get a chance to see what only God can do. So I want you to picture something this morning. I want you to picture the idea of risk and our spiritual growth like climbing a mountain. Any of you ever gone mountain climbing? Ever done that? Rock climbing, mountain climbing, anything like that? I have a friend who actually went. Remember a couple years ago, there was a group of people that were hiking to the top of Mount Everest, and there was a huge storm that came, and a lot of people got killed in that. He was on that expedition getting ready to go to that. They were at the base camp getting ready to move up, and they had to pull back, and they weren't able to complete the trip. But I've never done any kind of mountain climbing quite like that. But I want you to picture your mountain climbing adventure is equated to your spiritual growth, your growth as a church. Because climbing a mountain, as you can imagine, whether you've done it or not, is a challenge. There's a risk involved in that. It's risky to climb. One of the clearest directives, though, in Scripture is found in the idea that every Christ follower, the goal of every Christ follower, is to grow and to be totally conformed into the image of Christ. That's what Romans 8:29 says. Listen to this. The goal of every Christ follower is to be totally conformed to the image of Christ. That's the goal. Now there's risk involved in that. That's the top of the mountain. That's the peak. That's what we're aiming for. So God's goal for our lives, His purpose for our lives, is that we commit ourselves to this process of being totally conformed and transformed into the image of Christ. And it's a process. It's something that takes place over time. You don't stand at the base of the mountain and just jump up to the top of the mountain. It is a process. It takes time. It takes calculation. It's a process that's defined, though, by clearly marked steps. And along the way, those steps, there are highs, there are lows, there are thrills, there are chills, there are risks, and there are rewards. And so what I want to do is I want to take a look at some people from the Bible. We've been looking at the early church. And we've been looking at how can we build a community here that will reach our community, that will be history makers, that will make footprints and real tangible prints in this community, that will establish a catalytic transformational influence in this community. How can we be history makers like that? And we've looked at a lot of qualifying elements of what the early church history makers were like, and the same thing is true for us if we want to make history in our generation. And so today we're looking at history makers are risk takers. And there were early people in the early church who were risk takers. And as a result of their risk taking, as a result of them moving out of the comfort zone into the land of the unknown, history was made. And it's the very same thing for us here today. I want to look at some of these people from the Bible. If you got your Bibles, turn with me to Matthew chapter 4. In Matthew chapter 4, verse 18 to 22. This is the story when Jesus calls the very first followers. This is when this whole movement began. This whole catalytic movement of transforming the spiritual landscape of Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth, including McHenry County. It all began right here. And I want to just look at this, and I want you to understand that they had to determine in this early call whether they were going to respond to this call to take a risk or not. They all had to make this decision. Am I going to risk it, or am I going to stay here where it's safe? And I want to begin by just being honest about some of the fears that we have, some of the pitfalls that we have that can distract us on our journey. Look at Matthew chapter 4, verse 18. It says, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting their nets out into the lake. That's what they did. They were fishermen. They were at work. He saw them at work. Come, follow me, Jesus, and I will make you fishers of men. And at once, they left their nets and they followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat together with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. They were also fishermen. They were also at work. And Jesus sees them and he calls them out as well. And immediately, they left the boat and they left their father. And they went and followed him. Now there's a lot packed into that. I want to point out some things here about us. I want to point some things out that maybe will get you thinking about your risk level these days. Because when you think about the risk factor, there are sometimes distractions that come up. You say, I'm over here in the land of the comfort, and I need to go out there to the land of the unknown, and in order for me to get from here to there, there's a whole bunch of questions that I have. There's a whole bunch of fears that I have. There's a whole bunch of what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this goes this way? What if this goes that way? So I want to talk about some of the risk factors here, these distractions that we have. But I want you to go back with me to the early days of flight and what we did in this country. You remember Chuck Yeager? If you saw The Right Stuff, or you saw any of those space movies or anything about the early days of our NASA program, Chuck Yeager was the first pilot to break the sound barrier. And it's amazing to think about the willingness of these test pilots to push themselves toward the unknown. Mike and I were out a couple weeks ago at a place in Crystal Lake, and we talked to this guy, and we were just chit-chatting to find out what he did. You know what he does? He's a test pilot. He lives right here in Algonquin, and he was getting ready the next day to fly out to Maryland, and they were going to say, hey, take off and see how that works. And I was just amazed at this guy. It was almost like it was his last supper. We were watching it right there, you know. But we're listening to this guy with fascination. Like, can you imagine the fear that must be? Can you imagine the gap that must be between the safety and the unknown? And for Chuck Yeager, up until that moment, the sound barrier had not been broken. And a lot of people warned that it was physically impossible for a plane to go through the sound barrier. And the fear was that the plane, when the plane came up against that sound barrier, that it would explode, or it would just be crumpled into a ball of metal In the first two attempts, Yeager experienced a great deal of shuddering in the plane. Can you imagine this? And he's just wondering. He doesn't know what's happening. He doesn't know what's going to happen. And he comes close to Mach 1, and he wonders what's going to happen to him if he reached the speed of sound. And then on October 14, 1947, he found that as his speed increased and he drew closer to the barrier, everything started to smooth out, and it was then that those on the ground heard that sonic boom for the first time. I want you to think about what was going on in his mind and in his heart and in his life in that cockpit there. He refused to let the what-ifs distract him from risking. They were there, but he refused to be distracted by them. And there are these common fears that you and I have that have the potential of throwing us off target, being a barrier, a fear barrier, a terror barrier between where we are and where we want to be. Let me go through some of what these terror barriers are, what these fears are. First of all, there's, of course, the fear of the unknown. That's the most obvious. I'm sure that these fishermen knew that fear. It was the fear of the unknown. Who is this guy, Jesus? To be fishers of what? Fishers of men. What is he, crazy? What is he talking about? Is he starting some kind of crazy revolution? What's happening here? So they were leaving their livelihood behind. They were leaving what they knew to be true and what they knew to be right, what they had grown up knowing all of their lives, their livelihood behind them. What was going to happen to their families as they left them behind? What was going to happen to them? How are they going to support themselves? You think about getting stuck in that comfort zone, and it's always easy just to get stuck back where it's safe and where it's warm and where nobody pushes on you, nobody stretches you, and nobody causes you to step out there and kind of look over the edge. It's safe there, it's warm there, it's comfortable there. That's why they call it comfort zone. It's your comfort zone, it's comfortable. This is all that these guys knew, was fishing. Fishing day and night, week after week, month after month, year after year, generation after generation. They were fishermen. That's what they were. And Jesus says, I want you to leave that. I want you to come follow me. But they refused to be distracted. And they dropped their nets and they went and followed him. Here's another fear. There's this fear of not being capable. You ever have that? You ever have a new opportunity present itself and the first thing that comes in your mind, oh, I wouldn't be good enough for that. I don't know how to do that. I could never make that happen. Jesus was saying they were going to be fishers of men. And they had to be wondering, what in the world is he talking about? I don't even know the language that you're talking about. And you want me to join you? You want me to follow you? You want me to be a part of this? So there's Peter and Andrew and James and John. And they all understood fishing. They knew fishing. But fishing for men, how is that going to happen? What does that mean? But they didn't allow their complete lack of understanding to stop them from taking a risk. Sometimes you have to suspend the need to know in order to let God take you where he wants you to go. There's a third fear. There's a fear of not being good enough. There's a parallel passage of this story, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In Luke chapter 5, Jesus reveals his power as he is speaking to Peter, and he directs Peter to this miraculous catch of fish. So what happens is when Peter sees this miraculous catch of fish, he responds then by falling on his knees, and he says, I'm not worthy. Go away from me, God. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what your abilities are, but it's clear to me that they way exceed my own abilities. I am nowhere near being good enough to even be in your presence. That was Peter's response. We have that fear. We have that response. I'm not good enough. There's a lot of other people that are better than this. A lot of other people that can step in. A lot of other people that can serve this way. A lot of other people can have those conversations. Not me. That's not for me. The fear is that when we often feel confronted with this opportunity for growth, this new day, this new door that opens up, we say, oh, I know me. I know me. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. I'm not good at being a part of this. What can God do with me? You ever ask that? I have those questions all the time with myself, with other people. They say, what can God do with me? I don't know much. I don't have much to offer. That's a question I probably hear more than anything over the years is people say, could God really love somebody like me? Could God really use somebody like me? And what happens is this fear becomes a distraction. And you start focusing on that. And before long, you've built this terror barrier there. And you just stay in the land of comfort. There's also the fear of cost. What's it going to cost me? What's this going to mean? I think of the reality that these guys faced when it came to this fear. I mean, we read this as a story. We tell it and to our kids, and they were there at the beach, and it says, come follow me, and they came. And you kind of get this picture like this. It's this fairy tale thing. This was their livelihood. Imagine Jesus comes to you and he says, I want you to quit your job, and I want you to come follow me. We're going to do this full time. You know that thing I know payday's coming up next Friday, but I want you just to walk away right now. And you drop your phone and you close your book and you turn off your computer and you leave your laptop there by the shore. And you say, I'm going to come follow him. He was cutting into their livelihood. There was a cost involved in this. I still wonder what Zebedee, John and James did. I wonder what he thought when he's seeing his boys that he's been raising up to take over the family business, and they put down their nets and they abandon what he had been training and developing them to do all these years to go follow Jesus. He's probably thinking, boys, what are you thinking? Foolish, stupid young kids. I mean, they just think they got all the answers. They're going to go do their own thing. There is a cost at following Jesus. Sometimes it will cost you friends. Sometimes it will cost you family. Jesus talked about that issue when he told people that they needed to count the cost before they followed him. You need to understand that there is a cost. I'm not just selling you just a warm, fuzzy kind of utopia society here. There's going to be cost. It's going to hurt. It's going to cut. And this is one of those fears that needs to be addressed. You know, I'm a big fan of writings of John Maxwell. John Maxwell says, in order to go up, you have to give up. You can't get to the second step without taking your foot off the first step. You can't continue to climb without letting go of what's behind you. That's what this is all about, that there is a cost involved in this. And if allowed to run its full course, these fears, what they can do is these fears sidetrack us. If we allow these fears to take over, they cause us to start looking around. They cause us to start figuring out, all the reasons why we can't do something rather than the reasons why we can do something. And I suppose that's why I like the story of the fishermen so much, is because when Jesus called them, do you see what happened? Look at verse 20. If you've got your Bibles, look what it says. He calls out to them, and it says, at once they left their nets and they followed him. We're told that Peter and Andrew at once left their nets. We're told that James and John immediately left the boat, and they left their father, they left their family business, and they went and followed. Those are good words. Those are powerful words there, because they refused to let the what-ifs, they refused to let this terror barrier stop them from what God was calling them to on the other side. They refused to be distracted by the what-ifs. And the truth is, though, without overcoming the what-ifs, you'll miss out on the rewards. If you just get stuck behind that terror barrier, you'll never get over to the other side. And on the other side, there are rewards to your risk. Let's talk about the rewards for a second here. If we get past those hurdles of the what-ifs, there are rewards to making the risk, to taking that step, to making the climb, to making history, to making a statement. There are short-term rewards. There are long-term rewards. So let's talk about the short-term payoff. In Matthew chapter 6, the basic truth of this verse is that if we trust God and we follow him, he will take care of what we need. If we seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, then all these things that we worry about, our food, our clothing, our shelter, stuff of this earth that we need just to survive, all of those things, he said, I will take care. If you'll follow me, if you'll trust me, over on the other side of that terror barrier is a reward. I will take care of you. I will make sure you have what you need. That's his promise to us. So let's talk about some other ways, though, that we can expect a reward when we cross over to that other side and we take the risk. First of all, we get a reward for living on purpose. Part of the joy of getting to the other side is what we talk about as a church all the time, trying to help ourselves, help this community, help other people to get to the other side, to take that risk. And to say on the other side of that risk is the reward of life abundantly. Life the way you were made to live it. Life to the full. That's waiting for you on the other side. God has a goal for our lives. God has a purpose for our lives. He has, when you risk that adventure on making your spiritual journey, you risk taking that step. You begin to discover that you were made to love God. You were made to be loved by God, and you were made to love God. You were made to be a part of his family. You were created for that purpose. You were created for community. You discover that you were created to be in the image of Christ, to be made into Christ-likeness. That's how every single one of you was made. You discover that on the other side of the terror barrier. You find out that you've got gifts, that you've got spiritual gifts that He puts into you, wires into you, breathes into you, so that you can use those to fulfill His purposes. You discover that you have uniqueness that only you have, that God made you in a special way. You discover that you have a message to send to the world, to say to the world. You have a story to tell. That's all on the other side of that barrier. That's part of finding life and purpose, living on purpose. And people who never climb over that wall, people who never cross over that what-if gap, they never experience the joy of living. They're just existing. Day in, day out, they're just existing. And what happens is a lot of people have died a long time ago. They just haven't been buried yet. No one told them that. No one told them that they died a long time ago. And they're just existing. They're just existing. And they don't understand on the other side of that wall that there is a hope and there's purpose and there's meaning and there is life abundantly. Too many people merely exist. They just slug it out day in, day out, casting their nets out, fishing. Casting their nets out, fishing, just doing the same old thing. But those who risk the climb, those who risk getting to the other side, are rewarded with a sense of real purpose in life. That's the first thing. Here's the second thing, is that there's an adventure. I mean, listen, there is life. I think that is part of life abundantly. Life like you can't even imagine. Starting Lifeline has been nothing if not it's been an adventure. It's been an adventure. It's been a wild ride. I mean, I could talk all day about the doors of opportunity, the things that have happened, the conversations that I've had, the places that I've had some of those conversations, the people that we've met, the opportunities that we've had to serve. We have been recognized. We've been honored by our community as we serve them. And did you forget? You're meeting in a bowling alley. That's unbelievable. Who does that? All kinds of adventures that when we choose to risk, trying new things, new avenues of serving, new ways of learning the tools that God has given to us, talking to people the way you've seen God at work. That's the adventure of being a part of His church. I mean, my heart still races every time I get the opportunity to share about my connection with God. And in a very real way, not in a hokey, over-spiritual, religious way. Just the other night I had the chance to do that. In the most unexpected way, I had the most unexpected spiritual conversation with the most unexpected person in my life. I just know that God has called me and wired us to speak up. It's definitely an adventure when we choose to follow Him. And then there's another reward. There's the reward of seeking and seeing, new things. We get to see things from a whole new perspective. When you get on the other side of that terror barrier, you see things that not everybody else sees. That's what Jesus did. He saw things that nobody else saw. He said things that nobody else said. He experienced things and He did things that nobody else experienced and nobody else did. That's part of being a part of His mission. Think about those fishermen. They left their nets and they're following this guy Jesus. Think about what they saw in those next 3 years. Imagine what they saw. Imagine, just put yourself in their shoes or their sandals or whatever you want to. And imagine, you're just a smelly fisherman and that's all you've known. And, your hands are all calloused and you kind of stink and you're used to that kind of lifestyle. You're at the beach every day. You're out the boat every day. You're fixing the boats. You're fixing the nets. You're doing day in, day out, same thing. Now imagine you're following Jesus. Imagine what they saw. They saw the outcasts of society receive genuine love and feel wanted. They saw Jesus go head to head with the religious leaders. They stood back. You can just imagine them standing back saying, check this out. What he's doing. Look how he's talking to these people. They saw people that were born blind regain their sight just with the word that Jesus says to them. They saw that. They saw the dead walk out of a tomb. They saw that. They experienced answer after answer as God responded to their needs and the needs of the people around them. There are some great things to see on the journey. There's a great reward also in being able to be part of a team, to be able to play on a team. There's just something enjoyable about saying that I'm not in this by myself. We are in this together. You're linking arms and lives, and that's why I love communion time. That's why we talk about a family, is because we're not in this by ourselves. We are in this together. There's just something enjoyable about being a part of something bigger than yourself. I love the church because in this family we can move together. We can move toward a common goal, and we can encourage each other and spur each other on and help each other in times of need, and we can celebrate times together. So we pray for Carl when he falls and he hits his head, and we pray for him. We can celebrate with James when they're going downstate, and we can high five. You ever try to give yourself a high five? There's not a whole lot of sizzle to that. It's just kind of, but to be able to high five somebody else and say, we did that, I did that, way to go, good job. And I look at what's happening around us, and I see the stories, and I hear the stories, and I just think we are a part of building a winning team. And there's nothing that beats that. But along with those are just short-term perks. That's what we get to experience right here, right now. We don't have to wait till heaven to experience that. We get to see that right now. And then there's the reward that comes from taking a long-distance look as well. There's things that happen when you look over the long haul. Listen to what Jesus said to his servants in Matthew 25. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come, share your master's happiness. All this is yours. It's all yours. You get a piece of this. This is your inheritance. That's the long-term view. In 1996, when my mother died, I remember hearing that verse at the funeral. And every time I hear it, it just has fresh meaning. I've heard this verse all my life. It has fresh meaning to me now. My mom was a follower of Jesus. She lived her life risking to help other people, risking broken relationship, risking what people would say, risking what people would think in order to enjoy the adventure. And I hear a verse like that, and I just think, well done, Mom. Well done. Good job. Because I know that she is experiencing the truth of those words. Come and share your master's happiness. Come and share this. I know that eternal, long-term reward is hers because she not only experienced the short-term, but she experiences the long-term happiness of that as well. That's what I want to hear when my time comes. That's what I want to hear God say. Well done, Dave. Good job. You were faithful with a few things. I want to put you in charge of many things. Come share the master's happiness. This is all yours. I want to hear those words. I want you to hear those words. The best is ahead. The best is still ahead for those who choose to make a commitment, to take a risk, and be history makers. And so I look at those promises and all those things. They're just a great reminder of the fact that the risk is nothing compared to the reward. The risk of staying here is greater than the reward on the other side. I think the risk is worth every effort. It's worth the climb. It's worth the stepping out. It's worth going out into the unknown. It's worth the scariness. It's worth that butterfly in your feeling. It's worth the rocky road. It's worth the roughness of that. It's worth pushing through that because the reward on the other side is way worth it. Not just for the promise of the summit, but promise for the adventure as well. Life to the full. Life abundantly. Life experiencing things from a different point of view, seeing things from a different point of view as that journey continues. For the people that you get to meet and walk with along the way, for the thrill of having the goal to point us towards something. All of that is part of that thrill, part of that enjoyment. And I want you to hear today, God has a goal for your life. He has a purpose for your life. He has a destination set out for your life and for my life. And part of that goal for every single one of us is that we would be conformed into His image. We would be transformed, and then we would be conformed into the image of Christ, that we would look more like Him, that we would talk and think and act and speak more like Him. That's the goal. That's the promise. That's the destination. Experience that. In order to experience the joy of life to the fullest, you have to plot a course. Again, you don't just stand here and then just magically jump to the other side. Jump across that terror barrier. You have to plan it. You have to calculate it. You have to take a step. You have to follow a pathway. It's a step-by-step progress. That's the nature of spiritual growth. You don't just instantly get there. You take a step at a time. You don't accidentally grow in your walk with Christ. The mere passage of time does not make you more like Christ. Just because you endure it long enough doesn't make you more like Christ. The Bible describes growth as a process. And there is like a GPS in our lives, where a GPS, in order to get a destination where you want to go, you've got your phone and you set a destination on your phone. You said, take me to this place, map this out. Well, where do they begin? They have to begin with where you are right now. They know where you want to be, but they also have to understand, where am I right now? And once you know where you want to be and where you are right now you can chart a course. Now you can chart a path. Now you can have a direction to get to where you need to go. It's just like any GPS. That's the way our spiritual life is. We know where God wants to take us. My question is, where are you right now? What part of your comfort zone are you still in? How far out into that risk zone have you gone? Now, I've just seen it happen over and over again. There really are 4 distinct areas that, in my mind's eye, that I think people get broken down to on their spiritual journey. I want you to think through where you are on that. There is the beginning. There is that, what you might call that seeking level, where you're just saying, I realize that where I am right now is not where I want to be, and I'm looking for something else. I don't really even know what that is. I just know that it's not here. I need to get someplace else. And so you begin looking and seeking and asking questions. There's a lot of people that you interact with every day that are in that mode, and they're just existing, and they're like, this is not working. This is not good. I need to do something. But they don't know where to go, but they begin that process of being vulnerable. That's the risk. That risk, and the first step is to be vulnerable, to say, I admit that I don't have all the answers. I admit that where I'm at right now is not where I want to be. That's where it starts. And then there's people that move into that believer mode, where they say, okay, I believe that there is actually a purpose. There is something on the other side of that barrier, on that fear barrier. And part of our job, I think, as a church, is to help people to move down that path. That there's a risk, though, that's involved in that. About saying, I want to now go from this side of the fence to the other side of the fence. And the risk is that once you go to the other side of the fence, you know that there are still probably people in your family that are back here. There are still people that you work with that are back here. There are still people in your neighborhood, in your community, a husband or wife that is still back over here. And there's a risk in that. To say, I believe, and I want to be on this side of it. I don't know exactly all where I'm going, but I believe, and I'm going to leave my nets and I'm going to go follow. And there's a risk in that. And then once you're on the other side, then you get into this mode of really trying to mold and shape and transform and conform into the image of Christ. And that's what Jesus calls us to, is to make disciples, is to be disciples. And so at that place, now you're in the disciple mode. And the risk of the disciple mode is that you're pushing further away and you're waving bye-bye to your comfort zone, and you're out into uncharted territory, and you're thinking and acting and speaking and dreaming in ways that you never dreamed before, or thought before, or talked before, or acted before, risked before. There's risk involved in that, because you will not be the same. And then I think beyond that, there's really even another level where it's now you take a risk of not just being a disciple where you're being transformed and conformed into the image of God, but now you're stepping on, you're taking on the mantle of leadership, and you're saying, I will lead other people. I will be a part of helping other people to move out of their comfort zone and move forward. And there's risk in that. There's risk in stepping out and leading out front, because you may not think that you're ready. You may not think that you're qualified. There's risk in how you're leading other people. So my challenge for us today, my challenge for you today is to think this through. Where are you at on that global positioning thing in order to know where you want to go, which I think we've defined? My question for you is, where are you? In order to get to where you need to be, you have to understand where you are right now. The challenge is, if we're going to be a catalytic church, if we're going to be a spark plug church, if we're going to build a community here that makes a difference, if we're going to be a part of influencing people to move forward in their connection to God and their connection to His family, these are some concrete steps that we need to take to move to the next level. And it begins by knowing where you are, so then you can think and you can plan your next step. So if you're in the seeker mode, if you're still just like, I'm just in the beginning of this, I know that something is not right with my life, and I'm here because of that. You took a step to come here and be a part of this. It's pushing you into that next level. And the risk for you is to commit to Christ. That's the risk that you, am I ready to drop my nets, to leave what I know, to leave what I'm comfortable with, leave the familiar, to follow this one called Jesus. That's your risk that you need to consider. Before you do anything else, that's your risk. Maybe you're already there. You're already saying, I'm a believer. I'm on that other side of it. I want to follow. I want to go down that path. And you believe, and you say, yeah, I believe. Well, that's good, but that's not going to get you to where you want to go. So the risk for you is to maybe commit to being a part of the church. And say, I'm not just going to be a lone ranger. I'm just going to do this on my own. I'm going to commit to link arms and lives and be with other people and be all in and say, I'm in this and I'm in this with other people. That's a risk to do that, to make yourself vulnerable in that way. And then as you grow in that, you become a disciple and you begin to grow and you begin to mature. And that becomes a risk too, because now you're starting to engage your gifts. You're starting to serve and you're starting to figure out, hey, I've been doing and thinking this way and I've been acting this way. And that ain't going to fly anymore if I'm going to wear the banner of Jesus. I have to think and act a different way. And there's risk involved in that because all of your friends have known you in a whole different way. And now you've got to reintroduce yourself and say, you know what, I'm on this journey and I'm reorienting the whole direction of my life. My GPS has just gotten recalibrated. I'm going to a new destination now, and that's going to mean some things to the people around you. There's risk involved in that. You know, we say, we are a come as you are church. But we don't say it enough. We are not a stay as you are church. Maybe we need to start talking about that some more. Come as you are. You are loved. You are welcome. You are invited. Come sit. Come mix with us. Come talk with us. Let's do life together. Come as you are. But don't stay as you are. We can't just say, oh, come as you are. Just stay right there. Now we just have shifted the comfort zone to a different comfort zone. The risk of being a disciple is that you're pushing out of that comfort zone. And then you push a little bit farther, and then you become that mode of being a servant leader, where now you're investing in the lives of other people in an intentional way, in a strategic way, in a calculated way, and you're risking reaching out. You're reaching back, if you will, to people that have not moved out of their comfort zone, and you're helping them on their journey. You're helping them on their climb. You're helping them to say, come on, let's go up on top of that plane. Come on, let's get strapped into this thing. Let's let them lift this up. You're going to love the view from up there. It's a wild ride, and you're helping to harness them in, and you're helping them. I'm going to be with you. My arm is around you. They're going to lift this up together. We're going to enjoy this thing together. You're jumping out of the plane together. You're saying, we're in this together. That's the role of a servant leader, is helping other people to do that as well. Let me close by just reading this quote. Think about climbing a mountain. I love what Harold Melchert said this. He said, live your life each day as you would climb a mountain. An occasional glance toward the summit keeps the goal in mind. But many beautiful scenes are observed from each vantage point. Climb slowly. Climb steadily. Enjoying each passing moment. And the view from the summit will serve as a fitting climax to the journey, where God will say, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'm going to make you in charge of many things. Come, share your master's happiness. Years ago, Mike Wallace from 60 Minutes, he was interviewing these Sherpa guides that would take people up to the top of Mount Everest. And he asked these guides, because they risked their life, they unbelievable sacrifice, and it comes at unbelievable cost. And he said, why would you do this? Why would you do this to help other people? And the guide replied, to help other people do what they cannot do on their own. And then he said, yeah, but there's so many risks. There's so many dangers. Why do you insist on going back and helping other people get to the top of the mountain? And the guide smiled at Mike Wallace and he said, it's obvious you've never been to the top. Lifeline exists to help people get to the top. Life abundant. Life to the full. Life the way you were made and wired and created by your Creator to live. But in order to get there, it's going to take a risk. It's going to be uncomfortable at times. You have to risk your next step. The adventure, though, of taking that spiritual journey is a risk worth taking.